Before getting started, I just want to say that there will be timestamps for each portion of the video, as well as a list of all the hardware that will be used in the video. Now, with that being said, let's get started. Linux Mint 22.1, Cinnamon, and kernel version right here. CPU, RAM, as well as obviously why you're here to watch this video. No, wrong thing. All right. CPU is at 4.5 gigahertz, and the driver version I am using for this video is 580 or 580. Stellar Blade at 1080p on the medium preset got on average 61 FPS with a 1% low of 39. One thing I do want to note, when I tried this on Windows 10 with the exact same settings, I got on average 74 FPS. So this is a decrease of around 23% on this game, which I thought that this might be important to point out. If you were wanting to use this as like a Steam machine, you might get better results from using an AMD card. This is also not a Windows versus Linux video. I'm just giving you a rough idea of what you might be getting involved with this card. Cyberpunk 2077 at 1080p on the medium preset with FSR at balanced got on average 54 FPS with a 1% low of 43. And I also tried this on Windows 10 as well, and it got on average 72 FPS with a 1% low of 59. And that's roughly around a 33% drop from switching from Windows 10 to Linux. So when they say that switching from Windows to Linux is a decrease on Nvidia cards, especially with these older ones, they're not joking. Marvel Rivals at 1080p on the low preset with Epic TSR Ultra Performance got on average 82 with a 1% low of 30. The first Descendant at 1080p, low preset with Epic TSR balanced got on average 60 FPS with a 1% low of 38. SplitGate 2 at 1080p on the low preset with TAA dynamic resolution got on average 109 FPS with a 1% low of 38. Tainted Grail at 1080p on the low preset got on average 68 with a 1% low of 33. Warframe at 1080p on the high preset got on average 88 FPS with a 1% low of 53. When I bumped the settings down to low, it got on average 111 FPS with a 1% low of 30. The first Berserker at 1080p on the medium preset got on average 69 FPS with a 1% low of 51. Wuthering Waves at 1080p on the balanced preset got on average 60 FPS with a 1% low of 27. Predecessor at 1080p on the low preset got on average 90 FPS with a 1% low of 43. I tried to get Space Marine 2 to work. Unfortunately, it kept freezing on me when I was trying to get the game to run. I also did run into some issues with Wuthering Waves with it freezing on me. I figured out how to fix it though. All I did was delete the shaders and had them reload them, and it worked fine. And I did have some audio issues, but as soon as I closed the game out for Wuthering Waves, it fixed it. I also had the same issue with the audio issues with Marvel Rivals.
Frequency in her body is already...
Conclusions. I would say that the 980 Ti actually performed a lot better with the recent driver update. The previous driver update, which was that I used, was the 570 drivers. Those performed pretty bad. I got a lot of freezing in games. And the 580 update actually fixed a lot of those issues. Because before that, a lot of the games were behaving a lot like Space Marine 2 was. Which, that means still that there's still some things they're going to need to fix for the drivers. But I would still avoid this for Linux. Not only because of the driver quirks, but also the fact that you can get something around the same price point that's better. And the big elephant in the room would be, I'd say, the fact that the drivers are going to be obsolete, I believe, by the end of 2025, which is just right around the corner. This would not be a viable option. I think you could get much better on like an AMD card, like the Vega 56, 64, maybe even the 590. My big concern is that all it could potentially take is one big Linux update, and it could potentially just brick all of the 9 and 10 series cards. Because from what I've looked up, I don't believe Nvidia is planning on open sourcing any of the 900 series or the 1000 series cards. So that's something to keep in mind. Because if there's a big update, it could just brick them. Where it just behaves just like Space Marine 2, where it will freeze right after you start up the game. So I would avoid it for Linux. I will also be doing a test on Windows as well, so you can see a side by side. It'll probably be Windows 10 that I'll be mainly using for the tests, because I think it's a lot more fair than doing it on Windows 11. I will also be testing lossless scaling, just with regular lossless scaling, as well as you can use it where one GPU does the rendering of the game, and then you can use a second GPU for frame generation, which I'm going to be trying both with it being the primary GPU and also being the GPU where it will be doing all the frame generation, which I think that might be an interesting test. So if you'd like to see stuff like that, consider subscribing to check it out later.